Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the country, in the world, and whether you're watching it on the replay or watching us live. It's much more fun live. So many people join us and say hi, and then you might even peer down here, like Terry, who's always here from San Carlos, and Patrick Premontan says hello, good vibes. Yeah, he's kind of more like a Californian than Terry is as well. Marco G in the house, and we will be talking as always about GDK. Marco G from GDK, the Delphi Summit. Go there, scan there if you haven't already done it, or go to delphisummit.com and sign up if you can go. And I know not everybody can go, but if you can go, it's going to be a huge event in Amsterdam this year in the summer on the 5th of June. I'm just going to put let me just put that caption up as well. Here is a thing down the bottom because I've got this here. This is the link to go to as well. It's the same as this barcode, but same thing. Go there. Everybody is who's anybody is going. I know they've got a special secret guest going as well, and because spoke to them the other day, and also my topic for today. The person who is the speaker in a video, because I'm going to have a pre-recorded video of a part of it, he's going as well because he told me earlier on, and he said. Yeah, he said I'm being lazy because I'm showing pre-recorded video. Yes, correct. Actually, whilst we're talking about why I'm doing a pre-recorded video, and I will say hello to everybody in a moment, the reason is that Microsoft have made a change. And I was going to get the stuff ready. Yes, Marco G says Stefan Klinker. I got his name right, and then all of a sudden my brain went fuzzy again. Yes, Stefan Klinker. He is in the chat. He's hanging around, and he'll be here. He said he almost missed the session about Spring4D. He didn't get the email. I happened to message him this morning saying, "Oh, by the way, I don't know if you've not noticed this, but I'm doing a session on Spring4D," and he's like, "Oh no, I didn't even know about it." So, well, Stefan, as you'll find out shortly, is very big on this. So it's that. But what I was talking about was actually something that happened to me that was nearly a problem. Full stop. Let me just hide some of the chat for a second. And it's a big deal if you use Jabber or Google Meet or Restream, which is what we use for our broadcasting software. I just spent 2.5 hours. I'm not kidding. 2.5 hours, which I was going to prepare a better presentation in completely unable to do anything. Both my machines, the one that you see behind me over that shoulder, wouldn't work, and neither did this one, which is my main broadcasting machine. And the reason was this setting here. And what Microsoft appear to have done is they have pushed a privacy update out. And by default, if you see where it says let apps access your microphone, by default, it was turned off. And it took me, and I'm not, a slouch when it comes to technology, as I'm sure you'll understand. And the Restream tech support people, we tried everything because the message that comes up is that your browser is denying access to the microphone. Not true. What is actually happening is that the privacy update that's come out via Microsoft, because I just happen to patch my machine, I always do regularly, the privacy update had turned that second option, let apps access your microphone, and turned it off. And so as far as your browser is concerned, you can't access your microphone. Big problem. And it completely stumped several of us. We couldn't work out what it was. And it was only by sheer luck that I went, oh, you know what? I wonder if it's some kind of like accessibility or privacy thing. And I found it. There it was. It was in there. So thank you, Microsoft, for ruining my morning. I had plenty of time to actually do a much better presentation on Spring4D. But you know what? Stefan's presentation is way better than I could have done anyway, even though he says it's my lazy option. But let's say hi to a couple of people and then we will get into it. So Marco G, will be running the Delphi Summit once again. If you can go, and I know not everybody can, and I'm sorry about that. If you can go, you really should go. Hang out with me. There'll be some others there as well. Marco Cantu's going, Antonio Zapata's going, all the kind of people that you probably see quite regularly doing presentations. That will all be there, and you can come and say hi and talk about Delphi and all the other things as well. And in my sheer annoyance at everything going wrong, I forgot to turn on my do not disturbs off as well. So Randy says, hello, please say hello to me at the Delphi Summit. Randy, come up to me, because I'll be, in amongst many people. Come up to me, I'll be there and say hi. It's the one you need to go to this year if you can. If you can. I will be going to a few other countries as well, and I'm doing some stuff with Australia as well. Brazil again, Germany, Denmark in April. I think the UK may be having me as well. So I'm going to get about a bit, but this one, everybody will be there that you can imagine will be there. Daoud says Daoud Sabanda. So he's repeating his name. Yep, you've not quite got that right. Ralph says hi from Berlin. And Nigel says, oh, there is no notification this time. Subscribe, go to the YouTube channel and click on like and subscribe. So subscribe to our channel at Embarcadero Tech, and then click on the like button as well. That helps. But click on subscribe and then the little bell icon in it and say all, and it will send you notifications. You don't have to worry about getting some kind of automated notification. YouTube will do it. We won't know who you are. We have no idea who you are. But you will get a ping from YouTube and they'll say, oh, by the way, this is a channel you're interested in. They've just gone live. I tried to go live a couple of minutes before to make sure that, you've got time to realize that we're going live. Paul says, Heidi. Hi, Paul. We've spoken to Paul a lot on the email just recently about a few topics. Oliver says, hi from Stuttgart, of course. And Paul McGee says the reason for the he's still running Windows 98 unpatched. Paul, I hope you're joking, because that would be very worrying if you were telling the truth. I would definitely not recommend doing that. And Patrick agrees and says it's a very good choice. Yeah, it's a very, very bad choice. And Nigel says he's liked and subscribed. It's in the hands of the tech gods now. I'm sorry about that. Whatever happens now, it's not my fault. I can only do what I can do. Okay, so look, I want to get started and make sure that I cover the topic well. I have got a video that is actually quite an old one, and Stefan is around and may answer some questions as well, but he will be at the Delphi Summit and he will be doing a session, I'm sure, on Spring4D. Correct me if I'm wrong, Stefan, just ping me on a message or whatever. And Francis from Wilton says he very much enjoyed the trip down memory lane, aka Delphi's 30th birthday celebration on last Friday. It makes me feel a bit old now, having been at the London launch. Yes, a lot of people said the same thing. If you haven't watched it yet, it's long. It's 2.5 hours long. There are two videos. I did one that's just got the pre-recorded section of the video in, and then another video that's got that same pre-recorded section in, and then live chat. David into Simone was there. So was Marco Cantu, Stephen Ball, Antonio, myself. Feel like I forgot. Oh, and Richard Haverall. Sorry, Richard. Diminishing him there. I'm sure he doesn't need that. And just a few people there. So there you go. All right. So look, and Senga says, hello, Randy, the King. Okay. Well, I didn't know King Randy was joining us, but that's great news. Right. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to share screen, and then we're going to talk through some slides. At the end of the slides, I'm then going to play a pre-recorded video. It is old. It's from 2020. I was in the process of re-recording a new one, and then my machine just died. Well, it didn't die, but Microsoft killed it off. And I always prepare and make sure the broadcast is going to work. and I ran out of time to do what I was supposed to do. So it's easier if I get Stefan's video to explain, and then I can do the live Q&A afterwards. There is a version 2 now of Spring4D. That video talks about version 1, but we'll get to that in a moment. So let me share my screen first, and so that we can go and pick up with what we're going to do. So let us say from the beginning, and let me just resize this window, because it doesn't matter how many times I resize it, Microsoft insist on making it huge, which is not cool for me. So let me just minimize that and turn my preview off my camera. There you go. Okay, so what are we talking about? Well, the 30 for 30 webinars. It's 30 years of RAD Studio, actually Delphi, whichever way you want to look at it. And this is it's a momentous year, really. I mean, to make it 30 years, and actually we are not only making it 30 years, but we're under the top 10 now for languages. We're actually number 9 on the TIOB index, so we're doing pretty well. I'll talk about that later. But what we're doing is we're doing 30 webinars to just celebrate that 30-year anniversary. The links and replay and slides for today will be at tinyurl.com/spring4d30. Now, if you go there at the moment, it's going to go to the Embarcadero products page. That is completely normal. Don't worry about it. Once this webinar is gone and been broadcast, the replay and the links that link will automatically, magically change into a replay with a blog post. I've got a few to catch up. I've been super busy. Friday was obviously a very big event, and this one today is a little bit technical as well. So what we're going to talk about, well, Spring4D and why you should be using it. It is a superb, I suppose we would call it a library, but it's a lot more than that. It's almost like a framework or a way of coding in some ways. It's extremely popular. There are lots and lots of people that use it, and they tend to be people that have got into from beyond the basics of creating Delphi apps into much more regular advanced or professional stuff. That doesn't mean to say you have to be a super nerd to use it. You can pick and choose, and in fact in Stefan's video he talks about exactly that point. But it's a really, really great framework. I love it. It's very well crafted, and actually it's so good we actually use it as one of the yardsticks by which we test new releases of RAD Studio, because if it will work with Spring4D and Spring4D's tests don't choke on things, then we know we're doing a reasonably good job of making sure that the quality is there. Stefan is one of those MVPs who is extremely good at software engineering, and boy, he gives us a hard time about anything that's not right. He's very good at looking at things like assembler output, for example. He's made massive contributions towards the beta programs, pointing out things where we've messed up or things that aren't quite right or just general misconceptions. So I've got a lot of respect for him. He did say don't big him up too much, because what happens then is that people will have too high expectations of him. So I said, I'll remind everybody that you are a real boy as well. So there you go. Spring4D, well, it's a set of interface-based collections. So this is taken from their wiki site. It's got a powerful enumerable/T interface for accessing those collections. If you're not sure what a collection is, then look it up. Look for collections in Delphi, and it'll explain all about it. The video will make it clear as well. And it's a dependency injection container, and more on that in a moment. It's got an encryption library, and encryption can be difficult for us at Embarcadero because we have some US laws that prevent us distributing encryption. A similar problem with Mormot, for example, which is another very popular system. With Mormot, they also include their encryption, and then it makes it difficult for export licenses and things like that. But but that's the way it is. But encryption is good, and it's definitely worth having. It also supports a thing called reflection, or a reflection library that extends Delphi's runtime type information. It will work. It's open source, and it's available on the web, freely available on the web. It works on, I believe, anything from Delphi XE upwards. So Delphi XE and higher, including 12.2 and future versions as well. It's one of the things we check for. It consists of a number of different modules that contain like a base class library, so common types and things like that, and a dependency injection framework. And it is licensed under the, let me just check, Apache 2 license. So it's a pretty, that means you can use it for commercial use and things like that as well. It's a pretty generous license. It was originally written by Baoquan Zhou. And now I've totally mangled that name, and I apologize, but that is who was the original writer. But nowadays it's maintained by MVP Stefan Glenke, and Stefan is one of the people that causes me to spell Stefan, other Stefan's names wrong with an A instead of an E. But he's a very good MVP. Looking up on our MVP site, you can also go to spring4d.org, and that's where you'll find it. When you get there, Spring4D, there's a repository. You'll go kind of like to, if you're not used to Bitbucket, if you're more used to GitHub, then it might be a little bit confusing to start off with. But all you need to do is, it's a GitHub repository. So all you need to do is clone the repository using the Git command line, or something like GitHub Desktop, which is my own favorite tool, or any other tool that works with Git repositories. Okay, it's fairly straightforward. We've got some videos that tell you how to use Git. On that site, if you look down the side there, you'll also see there's things like issues and security, and also a wiki. And I forgot to ask Stefan, but I think he was working with Secure as well. Then he's already done some security scanning, so he did say he made a couple of changes, which is always good. And Secure, I think we're helping him out as well with some scans. So Secure have offered to do some, give some complimentary scans to MVPs that maintain open source repositories, and Stefan's is one of the best out there, so it made a lot of sense for them to engage. I'll have to ask him how that went. What else? After you've cloned the repository, go to the main folder, and there is a build.exe. So this is slightly different from how you would do things with a get it download or something like that. If you run that build.exe, what you will get is a screen that looks like this, and it will have all of the installed versions that you've got listed by default, because it checks and discovers them for you, and then tick the ones that you do and don't want. I warn you now, if you tick all of them, you're going to be there for quite some time, because Spring4D is quite what's the word I'm looking for? Large library. Yeah, large is probably the nicest way of putting it. It's extensive. There's a lot to it. And in fact, if you built only the 12 version on an average machine, which is what I was doing, it will take some time to finish. It is not quick. And by some time, I mean tens of minutes or more, not a few seconds. So don't do this when you're expecting to do something, later in the day that involves this. But choose the options that apply, and then click on build. And like I said, I would recommend you don't do all of the versions RAD Studio got, but whatever ones apply, go for it. When you do that, what will happen is there'll be a long pause while nothing will appear to happen whilst it does stuff behind the scenes. And then it will open a terminal window or a command window. Don't freak out. And it is doing all the builds. So it's using the command line compiler of RAD Studio to compile a bunch of project groups. And as you can see there, that's where I've got mine. I have a folder called VMS Share. It's just how I had it set up. And then Spring4D, and it does all the packages, and it will go through and it will build them all. It also, if you keep it ticked, which is ticked by default, it will do the unit tests as well. The advantages of unit tests are twofold. First of all, The unit test will make sure that what you are installing is going to work and that it passes the unit test. So there's not some failure of your install, you haven't got something patched that you should have, or your builder is not working. But also it's very good because you can open that. Yes, I see Stefan's comment there. But what was I saying? Yes, the advantage as well is you can open those unit tests and look at what a good set of unit tests look like. I'm going to show Stefan's comment there, which is blame the slow, not in Windows compilers for taking the time. Yeah, I totally get it. I want to make clear it's just the size of the project and how the compilers work, not anything that Stefan's done. This is going to be like this all the time, isn't it? I can tell. And Spring4D with the community edition, I suppose it effectively use the package. No, actually, Stefan, correct me if I'm wrong. He is commenting in YouTube, but you actually can get some pre-compiled packages and it will work. So you can. There is. I don't believe Spring4D is in Get It. I think you would need to, if you're going to use the community edition, then you can use the pre-compiled packages and install those. It does explain on the wiki how to do it, and installing them, you don't need to run this build tool. You can just open those pre-installed packages and install them, and off it goes. It'll work. Okay, so back to the rest of the slides. Now, in a moment, I'm going to show you a video, but not only is there a lot of video content out there about this and some blog posts, but there are also a couple of very good books that talk about Spring4D. And they are by some people that are very well respected in the community. If you don't know who Nick Hodges is, he used to be an employee of Embarcadero back in the day. And in fact, I think we've just got, says I've just joined, but I think that's actually someone else. Hold on, let's see who that is. Okay, well, we'll come back to that in a minute. Whoever you are, you need to rename your camera so that I know who you are. So there are a couple of really good books. There's a really good technical book about dependency injection. As I was saying, Nick Hodges used to work as an employee. He was a development manager, I think, for Embarcadero. It was before my time. But Nick is very well respected. You can go to coding for Delphi, codingindelphi.com, which is the link that I show there. And he's got a number of books which are very, very well respected in the community. A lot of MVPs say a lot of good things about this. And those are the people that know. They know far more than I do, to be honest. But coding in Delphi. But the dependency injection one specifically talks about some of the dependency injection features in Spring4D, which is definitely worth having a look at. So what I'm going to do is stop the slides there, and I'm going to play a video that is pre-recorded. Let me just stop my screen share and go back to the camera, turn myself back on, so to speak. So the video I'm going to show you now is about 49 minutes long, and it is an older version of Spring4D. And also Stefan is answering, there is no get it package, but it does not require the command line compilers, and it does not deliver pre-compiled packages. You just open the project group in the ID and hit build all. There you go. So you can literally do it without having to worry about the source code. I just, to be honest, when I install it, I click on build and it builds. So that's not something I did. And Patrick says, not a bad idea using the ID to compile Delphi projects. Yeah, well, you know, but the build tool is more efficient because it does it all tick, 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 and off you go. So what I'm going to do then is swap to the pre-recorded video. This was recorded in a previous coding boot camp, but it's a very good, even though, like I say, it talks about a version 1 of Spring4D, and we're now up to version 2 something. It does give you an overview very briefly from Stefan himself about what Spring4D does, how to use it. There's lots of code in there, so it's quite technical. If you've got some questions, please ask them in the chat, and I'll make sure that we get to answer them. I believe Stefan has joined as well, so we may join and talk later about this. But for now, I'm going to swap over to the video
Hello, ladies and gentlemen.
speak to
Welcome to
you in a little
DelphiCon
bit.
and this webinar introducing Spring for Delphi, Spring Framework. We're joined here by Stefan Blinke, and I'm going to hand it right over to him for his introduction and his presentation.
Thank you, and welcome to the session, Introduction to Spring4D, taking Delphi development to the next level. Well, that's a mouthful, I have to say, but my name is Stefan Blinke, and I'm a software developer, MVP, blogger, and obviously speaker on conferences with over 20 years of experience with Delphi. I'm also the lead developer of Spring4D. So what exactly is Spring4D? It's an open source library for Delphi XE or higher. You can freely use it in any commercial or non-commercial project because it uses the very permissive Apache license. It's an extension to the Delphi RTL, so to say, so you won't find any visual components in it or any things that you can drag and drop on forms, well, except one exception that we will see. It uses advanced generics and much RTTI in many of its features. It's under active development and it's practicing the so-called dog fooding, which means the author of the library and me and my co-workers, we are actively using it in our own commercial software. It follows the principle of pick and choose, so it doesn't dictate how you have to write your own application. You can take useful things you encounter in the library and use them in your code how you want. And you can take certain things and leave other things out of it. The currently released version is the 1.2.4, sorry, and currently development for the 2.0 is going on, and I hope and I plan to release it still in 2020, but you know, things can change, but most of the stuff's already finished. So some of the things you might see today, you will miss if you are using the released version. I will mention when I'm showing some new things you won't see in the 1.2, but in a 2.0. Well, how to get the library if you never used it before? You can either pull it with Git from this URL I have on the slide here, or you can actually use the zip file if you don't want to use Git, and make sure you are on the correct branch when you're downloading the zip file, because there are different links on the Bitbucket page. Then you can use either the build XE, that is just a small installer that just then runs MS build and compiles all the packages and builds the DCUs and updates the Delphi library path for you. If you don't want to use that, you can simply open the project group and compile all the packages yourself to produce the DCUs, because my personal recommendation is to always use precompiled DCUs and not compile the sources every time again, because given on the use of generics, it might take quite some time and some extra seconds that you don't want to spend if you compile your application, just to compile the same code that you did not change. Well, the quick overview, what is in the entire package of Spring4D, there are different runtime packages. That doesn't mean you have to use runtime packages with your application, it's just to organize the source inside the library. There's the base package that contains RTL extensions, goodies that are inspired by some other languages or are not in the RTL already. Contains a rich number of collections, which we'll see later. And there we have the core package that contains the DI container and an interception/mocking library. I will not go into details about those because that could easily span an entire session of its own. Then we have the data package, which just hosts an object dataset, which is the only component you might install in the IDE and drag and drop on your form or data module. And it is a component to connect the interface-based collections of Spring4D to some data-aware controls like a TDB grid. Then we have the persistence package, which contains an ORM, and the extensions package with some cryptographic and some other utilities. Although that package is not that much maintained, it works, but it's not actively worked on, and I'm not a cryptographic expert, so if you really want to use cryptographic things, you might use it, but I recommend using a library that is specialized on cryptographic things. Well, we will look at most of the stuff of Spring base package today, and this will be the nullable type, the event of T type, some types that you call smart pointers, which is the shared of T and weak of T, and then of course the collections, which in my honest opinion is one of the most amazing features of the Spring library. If you watch at the nullable of T, you might have seen it in other languages like in C# or .NET. It's a type-safe data type which can add the state of null or no value to an existing data type that does not have such a notion. For example, you have a date time and you also want to have the state of I don't have a date for something. So historically, you choose some date where you know that date will never occur, like -40,000, and that value is then the state for I don't have a date. And then there's the infamous true false or file not found enum, where you, well, which is not a Boolean in itself, but has a third state added to it. And if you model something like that, where you have a yes or no, or actually you don't have an answer, you might consider using a nullable of Boolean. Or someone might say, well, we have variants that already can contain null and values. However, a nullable of T does not allow implicitly converting between otherwise incompatible data types. Like a nullable of integer will never be assigned compatible to a string, while a variant can easily convert to string and to integer in both directions. And if it's a string that is not a valid number, you might get an exception at runtime. With the nullable type, you won't get something like this. Let's see the code for some example for the nullable type. I have in my demo project here. And if you want to use the nullable type, you simply add the Spring uses a unit to your uses, which comes from the Spring base package. So I have a nullable of date time here, and I use the now value for a local date time variable for now, and then I just print if the nullable has a value, which is a bool property, or I can print the string directly to a string. And then I assign my date time to my nullable of date time. And it is important to know that in contrast to some other types, a nullable, even if you use it as a local variable, has always a defined state, which is I don't have a value. So even if you use it as a local variable and you don't assign a value to it, it will always say that it does not have a value. After I assigned some datetime value to it, I can again ask if it has a value, and I can print the value to a string, which is underneath using the known toString formatting that you have in the RTL. So for my datetime, it will use my regional settings for the datetime format, which is in German right now. I can then assign nil to my nullable, which clears the value in it. When I ask it then again if it has a value, it will say that it does not have a value again because I then assigned the empty state to it. If I don't know if I have a value or if I don't have a value, and I don't want to use the has value before to check, and I want always a value even if it does not have a value, and I want to provide some default for the state of emptiness, I can use the get value or default method. This method also allows passing a default value in case the nullable does not contain a value. I can also compare nullables to each other, or I can compare the nullable to the type they are for. So I could here also compare the nullable to a datetime. So in this case, both my n and n2 are empty because I explicitly set n to empty and I did never initialize n2. So they are both empty, and equal should say that they are equal. If I then assign a value to one of them and compare them, they should be different. And if I add the same value to the other nullable, they should be equal. So if I run my code here, you see it first says that it's empty, so it returns false in a has value, so it doesn't have a value. It prints, in this case, null. If it has a value, I can get the value, as I said, in the local format settings. When I use the toString, I can also use the .value to directly access the value and then process it any further. In this case, I passed no default value, so it uses the default for the date time, which is 0, and 0 is the 30th December of 1899. And two empty nullables are equal, and two nullables with the same value are equal as well, while a nullable that is empty and a nullable that contains a value are not equal. So let's go to the event of T, which is also called a multicast event. It is similar to the observer pattern. Basically, it's the observer pattern as an easy-to-use type where you don't have to implement it yourself. You can simply implement the publish subscribe with it, similar to regular events we all know from Delphi. It does support any event signature, and that signature is then provided via the generic type parameter here. So if you have a notify event, you specify your event as an event of tNotify event. It is also very fast and thread safe. And with fast, I mean it is as fast as if you would call the loop yourself. Let's see the implementation. Again, the type is from the Spring unit. And I declared a local variable here, my f_on_mouse_move, which I declared as an event of tMouseMove event. And the tMouseMove event is the one from classes, which specifies shift state and the x and y coordinates when I move a mouse over a control. Then I have a small event subscriber class here, which is in the other unit. It's just a component that has also a multicast event for a position event, and this position event will give me the x and y coordinates. It also has a handle mouse move event handler that is for the tMouseMove event. When I create this, I then add this subscribers handle mouse move event to my f_on_mouse_move event. And you can see here that is the difference to a regular event. I have an add method because an event of T basically is like a list of event handlers. And once it gets triggered, it calls all the event handlers and not only one, as we have with the regular and classic events in Delphi. So on the one side, I have my own mouse move, and I add the handle mouse move from my subscriber. And then on the other side, I have the onUpdate event of the subscriber, and I add simply 2 event handlers of my own to this onUpdate event. The one is simply printing the coordinates to my caption of the form, and the other one is changing the color to red if my Y coordinate is higher than 300 and changing it back to the window color if it's less. What I do then is connecting these things. Log is my memo here I have on the form, and it of course has an on mouse move event. And I connect my event of T mouse move to the on mouse move, and I can do this with operator overloading because the event of T is a record type, and that one has an operator overload where I can assign to a T. So I have here my T mouse move, and I can assign the event of T mouse move there. I can also have, and this is a regular notify event on the event itself. I can be notified if there's any change happening, which means someone attached an event handler or someone removed an event handler. And I have my notify event change here, which simply shows a message that it changed. I'll show you in a minute why I added this. So back to the event subscriber, we can see I have the handle mouse move, which is being called from the forms event of T. And this one simply takes the X and Y coordinates and invokes the local F on update event, which will then trigger the 2 event handlers that I attached via the form. There are basically 2 types. One is the record type, and you never saw some create here because this record type uses auto initialization as soon as I call some method on it or assign it somewhere. So you never have to create them and you never have to destroy them. However, if you give them to other parts of your code, you should do it via the interface-based type, which is iEvent of T. And here I have the getter, and I can again use a direct assignment because my event of T is assignment compatible with the iEvent of T. But you should never give the event of T outside of this class. This is just for some fields, and you don't have to create them explicitly in your code. So when I click this button, I attach the event, and you can see when I move my mouse over the memo here, the coordinates are getting shown in the caption, and when I go over the 300 in the Y coordinate, it gets red. And now the interesting thing is when I close, I get the notification of the change, and that is because my event subscriber component, which I created here with the owner self, which destroys it automatically when I close my form and it gets destroyed. An event knows if the event handler it is attached to is of a T component, and then it automatically disconnects this event. So if I have a event handler that is implemented by a T component class, and that instance of that T component is destroyed, it would automatically notify the event where it got attached to disattach the event handler. Next are the so-called smart pointers. We have the shared of t and the weak of t, and they can use to add lifetime management to objects or other resources without explicitly stating a try finally block. And it makes it way easier to pass around such resources, because otherwise you always have to know, well, which is the part of the code that has to, in the end, destroy something. And if you share some resource with more than one consumer, it might get cumbersome to track down which is the last consumer that is responsible for destroying these. And so this is basically just like interfaces with the reference counted. So you can add this reference counting to types that don't have a notion of reference counting. With the weak of t type, you can also avoid circular references, and this is in all the versions Spring4D comes from, which is even before Delphi got added the weak attribute, which you can put on interfaces. Plus there's a little bonus. A weak of t works also for objects on all platforms, and if you have a weak of t where t is an object, this reference will get notified if the object it is referencing will be destroyed, which is usually not the case. Let's see the code for this. I have three different uses of the shared here. There's also a record type, which is shared of t, and I can directly assign my string list to this shared for a string list, and I then have to access the string list in my shared of t string list with the value property, and I can access all the methods of my t string list. I can also pass this directly to any method that wants a string list to be passed, or any of the base types, in this case the add strings method of the memo lines. Then there's the interface-based iShared of t, which is similar, but the usage is a bit different. You cannot directly assign a value to this one. You cannot directly assign the string list to an iShared of string list. So in this case, we make use of the shared.make method. And because you are passing the correct type here, we are creating a string list, which is returning a string list. Usually you would have to specify this type here, but in this case, the type inference of Delphi just works. And this make method will return an iShared of what was passed here, in this case an iShared of t string list, and you can assign it to our local variable. When I'm using the interfaced version, I can directly access all the members without typing .value, because this is a special interface type, which is actually like a function, like an anonymous method that returns the string list all the time. And again, I can directly pass this one to my addStrings method. Now the advanced use of this, if I have something that is not just an object, or I want to perform any operation before the object is being destroyed, I can specify an optional finalizer proc, which is the second parameter here in my make method. And in this case, I have an iShared of t strings to show you that even the base type works here. In this case, I have to specify the generic type parameter here, because otherwise it would not properly compile. So this is the method as it's being called once the shared goes out of scope or reaches the reference count of 0. And then I'm printing this out here. Otherwise, I'm printing in the other cases, I'm printing before I'm exiting the method. And here I will first have a slow delay, so you can see that the add strings is then later called after I press the button. And in this case, when I'm giving the finalizer proc, this one replaces the otherwise just freeing of the object. So I have to do the freeing myself in the finalizer where I did some other things. So this can also be used if you have something like a system where you can using handles or even the Win API, and you can make a shared of some file handle. And then once this thing goes out of scope, you can specify a finalizer proc, and in this finalizer proc, you can call then close handle or what is necessary to free the resource you are using. So if I press all these three buttons, you notice the short delay on the shared tree. And if I close my application, there's no memory leak report, although I specified the report memory leaks on shutdown, because otherwise, if I would just create a string list and would not free it, it would report a memory leak. So this just works like a try final block here, and I in fact could then pass the string list down to, or the shared of the string list down to some other code, and when it's done using the string list, it will automatically destroy it. So then I have a weak reference to something, and while I'm not demonstrating the use of the circular interface references here, because we also already know that, here's just a demonstration that it also works for objects, which the weak attribute that got added is just for interfaces, at least on the desktop platforms or on all platforms in the latest Delphi versions that don't have Arc anymore. So here I'm creating my string list, and I'm also assigning to the weak of strings, which is then the base type, which here works because the string list is assignment compatible to tstrings. Add my line here, and then I'm printing if the reference is still alive. I can then also pass the weak reference to some method that expects tstrings, which again uses operator overloading because this again is a record type. And if we usually do a free here, of course, in this case, I have to use the free because it's just a plain object reference and not a shared of tstring list here. Usually, if you do this here in this code, then the weak references, if this was just a tstrings variable, it would point to some memory that was already freed. So you have a so-called dangling reference. And not even free in nil would help here, because I would free in nil on the SL variable, and the SL variable would then nil, but not the weak ref or the other reference that I assigned to. And this might be some completely other code where I assigned something to, and then I would have to come up with some notification mechanism where all participants that have references to something that might be destroyed are getting notified. And this is basically what is happening here underneath. So if you assign something to a weak, this is internally tracking this reference, and then if that object is destroyed, it notifies all the weak references, similar to how the weak references under ARC work. So I can then call the isAlive method, or I can get the target property, which is always pointing to the instance, similar to the .value on the shared. Or I can also compare it to nil or some other strings variable if it's the same one. And we can see at this point it is alive because we assigned a valid object to it. And then later, after we destroyed it, although we did not do any assignment to the weakref variable, it will print false because it is not alive. Target is not assigned, and weak reference itself compares to nil as unequal, as equal. It is nil. Now to the collections. They are all interface-based, which makes memory management, well, a no-brainer, because you can simply pass around collections, return them from functions without worrying about where I actually have to destroy my list or my dictionary because I don't know, or I have many disconnected places that just have passed items in lists around, and I don't have to worry about all the freeing of those objects and those lists. It gives me an extensive API via the enumerable of T, and that enables writing expressive code less cumbersome because I don't have to code all my loops explicitly, but I can use some of the nice methods of enumerable of T, and therefore also on all the collections because they all inherit from enumerable of T. And this is not the enumerable of T from the system functions, but a type from Spring collections.pass. While not 100% of a replacement, it is meant as a replacement for system generic collections. So if you're using these and you might want to have some more advanced features on those collections, consider moving to Spring collections. One difference to classic collection usage, though, is that you should not create your T-list of something or your T-dictionary from Spring collections yourself. Always use the factory methods from the T-collection static class in Spring collections. So all you have to do is just add Spring collections to a users, and you have all the collection types for your use. So avoid using directly any Spring collections.star units in your code. The collection interfaces are organized in different categories. Well, base type is enumerable of T, which is a sequence of items. Then there's the collection, which is a collection of items that are not index based. And then on top of that, there's the list, as we know, which has all the index-based methods on it. There's map, which is the base type for the following types, which is the dictionary and multi-map. And then there are sets and multi-sets. As you saw, you have the normal list or the normal collection, and you have a read-only list and a read-only collection. There is no immutable collections in Spring4D where it would create copies if you add to the collection. There are classic collections and lists where every time you add or remove items, the state of the list is changed. But sometimes you might want to have only read access to something. And then you should consider just passing the read-only version of that list or that dictionary to some code. That doesn't mean that your code automatically becomes thread safe in case of some threads might add items to the list and the other thread just reads them. But it ensures that that code that should not add to the list or remove from it can actually do it. So enumerable of T represents an unordered sequence of items that are not yet materialized. It's the core for collection types, as I said, and it contains a huge number of methods that you can work with. So this not materialized, what does that mean? So if you have an enumerable of T, you don't have to think about, oh, I have these items in it. Think of it as kind of query. You have something that states that there are some items, but you don't know which items that are. Like if you specify an SQL statement, You just say, okay, give me these customers where their order total are higher than 9,000, and then you specify this SQL statement. But having this SQL statement doesn't mean you already have this customer data. Only if you execute your SQL statement, you might get these results you want. And it's the same with the IEnumerable and, for example, the where method. It returns, again, an IEnumerable of customers in this case. But if I just have my variable of an IEnumerable of customer, it doesn't mean I have any customers in it. They only might appear when I actually execute or iterate these. Of course, the original customers list might contain those customers, but there's not a second list being built that then contains all the customers with a certain number of total orders. So this goes with the streaming and the deferred execution. So when I execute any method on IEnumerable, and this method leads to some results, the operation that is then being done is as lazy as it can be. In this example, let's say we have the customers with the criteria to only get certain customers. And I say then, okay, take 10 of those customers. Oh, there's a missing dot here. And if you have like 1,000 customers and many of them would have this number of total orders, and I only take 10 of them, there's only this filter delegate is only executed as often as it needs to be to yield the 10 elements. And as I said, with the statement, and think of an IEnumerable as I have a query of something, the materialization of any items that might sit behind it only starts when I iterate over it, or if I call some method that requires this operation. Then we have iCollection of T, and this is then a collection really behind it. You can then know that there are materialized items behind it. There's an array or some other kind of data structure behind it that holds your customers. And that one already has the add, remove, extract methods. And it offers an on-change event where you can be notified if any changes happen to these collections, like adding customers or removing them. And then on top of that, there's the iList of T, and that is what we know as the list where we can have index access. And on top of the add or remove methods, we can say, okay, I want to add elements at certain positions into the list, and I want to get the position of the items, and I can call sort of it because sorting is based on the order in the list. So let's look into our enumerable. I have my numbers here, which is an enumerable of integer, and I say simple, okay, give me like 10 numbers. This is the start, and I want 10 elements for it. And then I just can simply iterate over those items and print them out. I can also add this where clause here and say, okay, I just want to have the odd numbers. And then I can pass in a filter delegate here where I get in the type that I want or the item that I want to filter, and then I can apply the filter function on it. And again, I can then enumerate over the enumerable, and this enumerable is a different one from this one, where this one is just the numbers with an applied filter. So when I execute this one, so I get the numbers 1 to 10 for the first one, which was the range from 1 to 10, and then I get the odd numbers. And if I called the odd numbers given the last number, I just get the 9 from it. Now about the list. Again, I'm using the collections type to call the create list method, and there are many overloads for this one. And I can directly pass some initial elements here, or I can add them later with the add range function, a method which accepts either an array of integer or an enumerable of integer. And of course, I can insert also a range at a certain index. And so again, I create a list with the numbers 1 to 9 here. And to show you about the deferred execution for the enumerable and in this case, the where method, again, I want to have the odd numbers, but I assign it in this line here already. And then later I add some element to my list. And only then I iterate over the odd numbers enumerable. And in this case, for the first iteration of the list, I get the numbers 1 to 9, and then I'm printing the odd numbers, and you can see it contains the 11, because even though I assigned the enumerable for the odd numbers in this line and only after added the 11 to the original list, at the point I'm iterating over the odd numbers, this one is then seeing the items that are in the list at this point. If I cleared the list before, the odd numbers would contain no elements. So then there's the more advanced types like map, dictionary, or multi-map. And map is an associative collection that contains the methods to add, remove, or look up a key. The dictionary is then a collection of key value pairs where the key has to be unique. We know that from the RTL already. But then there's also a multi-map. And this is basically like a dictionary where for each key you can have a collection of values. Or think of it as a dictionary of key and list of values. And there are different versions for the collections for each key. And you can then control with the creation how they behave. Let's see. So I have my multi-map for integer is the key and a string. And I then have my lorem ipsum generator here, which generates 100 words from the lorem ipsum. I'm just iterating them. And then for the length as the key, I'm adding all the strings for each length. And then I'm iterating my multi-map keys, which are the length from the strings I added into them. And then for each length, I'm iterating the words. And this is the, as you know from the dictionary, the access for this key. But in this case, this one is not just returning one value, but again, a collection of strings. Because for each number, I can have several strings that have the same length. So as we can see here, we have our words with 2 letters, 3 letters, and so on. But you can already see there are, well, either not sorted and there are duplicates in it. What if I don't want to have the duplicates? Well, as I said, there are different multi-maps. In this case, the standard create multi-map creates a dictionary of list for values. So if you have duplicates for every key, the duplicates get added, just like in a list. Just if I change it to a hash multi-map, the collection for the strings for each length is a set, and a set can only contain a unique value once. So again, if I execute this one here, and then execute this, you can see the duplicates are no longer in it, because every time I try to add a duplicate, it just simply ignores it. But in this case, the strings were not sorted by some criteria. What if I want to do that? Well, I can use another multimap, which is then a tree multimap, and that one, instead of a hash map, internally uses a tree, which uses sorting to make items unique in it. So if I'm executing this one, I have then my words by length and even sorted without explicitly saying so. Of course, I could only use the hash multimap and then use this one here. But then if I want to iterate this very often, I would always have to call the order, and this would be an operation that would be performed every time I iterate the items. I mentioned set already, which is like an enum set, but not just for enums, but for any type. And think of it as a dictionary where you don't care of the value, you just care of the uniqueness for the value you put in there. So they're either hash table based sets, and they preserve insertion order, contrast to the RTL dictionary, which does not preserve the insertion order. And then there's a tree implementation, which stores the item in an order given by the comparer that I'm passing, or actually the default comparer if I don't passing anything. And then I have a multiset, which is like a dictionary for a key and a counter. So in this case, you can count how many times you add something, or you can remove the item. And this is a very easy a type for very easy counting occurrences of items. So we can see this. The last code example, again, I'm using my lorem ipsum, which is just a function that returns an array of string. And I'm creating my multiset of string and I'm directly passing in, because this one accepts an array of string. So I have my word counts, and word counts has a property called entries. And this one returns a collection for the item and the count. Identical to a dictionary where you would manually count up or down for each key when you want to add it. And in this case, I can then see how often each word was in my generated array for my text. And if I wanted to have these word counts ordered, I can simply say ordered by count. And if I iterate this one, you can see the one that was there 8 times is on the top, and those where there was actually none, that was just 1 time, but they're now sorted by the occurrence. So if you want to know more, you can browse the code, look into the many unit tests. There's lots of XML documentation inside the code itself, which also helps you once you use the methods, because it directly appears in your editor in the hint. We are getting the documentation improved and getting started articles for the 2.0 release. And we welcome your feedback. Either get in touch on the forums, and yes, Google Groups is still a thing, or if you found a bug, please let us know on our issue tracker, And well, I think now we have 10 more minutes for Q&A.
And in fact, we have more than 10 minutes of Q&A. Okay, so that was a video from a previous DelphiCon 2020, and Stefan said in that video, which, as I said, was an old one, is like, oh, I hope to have this finished in 2020, and he actually did say in the comments, actually, the version 2 was released in November 2023. Hey, you know, greatest plans in the world kind of don't work out. And, you know, when you're working on open source, and it is a very big open source project, you know, it's a miracle anything ever gets released. I'm absolutely in awe of anybody that puts the effort that they do into open source. If you follow an open source project and they've got things like, you know, like a sponsorship or something like that, if you can afford it, you should try and sponsor the projects that you use, particularly if you're a corporate. How much money would you spend writing something like Spring4D? I think many thousands to get where you are. It's got some really great features, you know, and it's all done for you. Patrick says, oh, you know, Stefan says the last slide aged even worse. The docs are still being the worst point. Yeah, well, you know what? Don't worry about it, because I was still doing slides this morning, and then the computer didn't work, and all sorts of things. And Patrick says, oh, and Google Groups. People get this confused, actually. Google Groups still very strong. Google Plus, which is what I think a lot of people conflate the two together. Google Plus is dead and buried long ago, which is a shame. It's quite an interesting experiment. But Google Groups, yeah, very, very much working and still going. So it's not a problem. Patrick says he thought they were closed like Google Code and previous social things from Google. Well, you know what? I don't trust Google, but after today, when they messed up my microphone by just introducing at random a new privacy change, I don't trust Microsoft either. So I think they're all a bit of much of a muchness. We had some great suggestions. Paul McGee and Stefan, as I said, is in the YouTube group, but he can see this question as well. It wasn't question, but suggestion: nullable.apply, so that you can have like a for each for nullables, which is actually an interesting idea. Nullable types are one of those things we get asked for a lot in Delphi sort of Q&As, and we being Embarcadero. Nullable types are actually something that once you get a little bit beyond the early stages of the coding, you'll start to see the benefit of nullable types. And the interesting one, as Stefan showed in the video, is where you've got something like a date or time. You can have a date that is a valid date and time, or it can be null. And that happens a lot in SQL statements, where you do a SQL statement and that date is calculated or it's just a record and it comes back null. And it's very handy to be able to have that kind of thing. And the other thing that Stefan mentioned as well when he was talking about nulls was a Boolean that is nullable. And what that means is that the nullable Boolean can be true or false, or you haven't decided whether it's true or false. So, for example, it's a bit like Schrodinger's cat. You've got the cat and you've shut it in the box as the experiment, and it's with the radiation source, which is Schrodinger's horrible thought experiment. And at that point, until you open the door, you don't know if the cat is alive or dead. You just know that it's in the box of the radiation source. And so there is an indeterminate state. The cat is both alive and dead until you examine it. And that's a bit like a nullable, true or false, because you don't know whether he's dead or alive. You have no answer. And so the correct answer is null, because it's not true, it's not false, it's not dead, it's not alive, it's both at the same time. And a nullable type does that. And Stefan says, a null propagation operator, please. Yes. Yeah, Marco Cantu is the guy to talk to about those kind of things, as you know. But I'll pass it on. They do watch a lot of these webinars as well, and they do pay attention. Muzio is a frequent flyer on these webinars. Says very, very interesting. Even if at the moment I use version 2, which is different from version 1. Yes, there are differences. Look, this morning I started to put together some examples, and then I always check that the webinar is usable, and I got stuffed by a change that Microsoft did, and even the Restream tech support people couldn't fix it, and I thought I was actually going to have to cancel the webinar. It was that bad that I'm like, there's nothing I can do. I can't make my microphone work on any of my machines, this one and that one, and my Chromebook. I can't really broadcast anything from my Chromebook. It's not how it works. And it turned out in the end that it was just something that Microsoft had done. So my examples went out the window. So it was easier to take that older video, but 90% of it still applies. There's some really, really great features in. If you are more into coding, then you'll know about some of those features as well. There's some great stuff in there. Oh, and Restream just wiped out my notes as well. Thank you, Restream, for doing that. That was very clever. Paul says, and this is from JW, I think, this is an incredible, pretty amazing set of tools for free. Yes, it is. And I'll put the QR code in the top right-hand corner again. Up, actually, it's up the left. Why did it reset everything? Okay, but I compiled on the Beast and it just finished. Yeah, it takes a lot. If you compile it from scratch, be prepared to go and have a lie down and rest for a while, because it's going to take a while to compile. Like Stefan said before, there are pre-compiled DCUs and things like that, so you can just open it in the IDE, compile it with the ready-made DCUs, and then your project will work. So it's pretty good. I started it right as the video started, just version 12. Yes, good, excellent, that's cool. What else have we got on the chat? This library implies that you really get into a new way of thinking. Yeah, when I show these 30 for 30 webinars, I wanted to go a little bit beyond the ones we've done before. When I first started doing the developer relations, I thought it was important for us to reset some of what we'd shown before. And so I created a number of, this is how to create a basic Windows app. This is how to create an iOS app. This is how to create an Android app. I want people to open the IDE and know how to do basic things. I want new people to start using RAD Studio. I want them to be able to know how to create an Android app like that. And we're doing more to that. We're going to create some other things to go into the IDE to help educate people. But it was important that I laid the foundations. The 30 for 30, I am still covering some of the basics as well, and try not to show too much code, because I want you to go in further and explore the code yourself. But this was a session where I always knew there was a risk that some of the new people are going to go, oh, it's too much. And I get that. But don't worry, there's other webinars coming up where we're going to do all sorts of exciting things. I've got a package, by the way, that will be exciting for new people. It came from One Thinks. I'm going to talk about this. And I'm going to talk about this another time. But this is a LoRa wide area network card, and it came from a company. I will call them out when the time is right. But it did arrive. If you're watching this webinar, but it did arrive for me, and we're going to use Delphi to talk to this. So we're going to do a lot more other exciting stuff as well. But if you're a coder, what you see with Spring4D is amazing. It's really, really cool. I mean, like, the IEnumerable types that are in it are pretty amazing. I like the bit where Stefan says week of T. So it means like the chevrons where it's a weak type of T. But as a Brit, I cannot agree with weak T. It's got to be builder's T, and if you're a Brit, you'll understand that. But it's good. Paul says he'll be using it. Nullable is a really cool concept. Yes, it is. It's very useful if you're handling data. We've only scratched the surface of what Spring4D can do. This is why I wanted to include this in here. Ordinarily, I'd get guests on to talk about the webinar, but in this case, Stefan talked a lot in the video as well, and it's not. I don't like to drag people in and then have them, put through the fire, so to speak. He will be at Delphi Summit later on this year. He's one of the confirmed guests, and so you can go up and say hi to him. He's an MVP, very smart guy, well respected amongst his peers. He doesn't want me to build him up too much, but he is a smart guy. And go to the Delphi Summit and meet him and me and a few others as well, and we can hang out and talk about Delphi. But yeah, Nullable, very interesting. As Patrick says, even if there are differences between 1 and 2, which there are, it's interesting to say this library exists and it is well maintained, and it really is. There are a lot of projects and webinars out there that on projects that are a little bit shaky. Open source is like that. These people are maintaining a lot of this in their own time, unpaid, and they can't always contribute their time effectively to the project. That's not the case of Spring4D. Even though it took a few years longer than he said, it still works very well. SECO6, you can go to our YouTube channel and always watch the replays. And actually, if you open the IDE down the right-hand side, let's see if I can find it. I don't think I got a screenshot for it. Yeah, if you open the IDE and look on the welcome page down the right-hand side down there, you'll see a thing that says Learn. All of the most recent webinars, the replays are in there. So never worry about being late and missing out. I talk a lot at the beginning so that people have got time to join, but also so that you feel like you're engaged and all the rest of it. And the clock's changed soon, so things are moving around. Patrick says, there's no time for spoilers before a replay of this webinar. Yes, you'll see it. We'll push it out to there, and there'll be a blog post about it as well. And he says in there, Yorkshire tea, says Francis, when we're talking about week of tea. Anyway, I knew this would descend into like silliness. Anyway, Spring4D, I just want to call it out one more time. So this is where to go if you've not already gone. I know a few people scanned the QR code as well. Go there. I can't say enough good things about this project. We all of the MVPs and employees of the company very complimentary about it. Stefan will be the first to say he's not the first, but he didn't write it originally, but he contributed towards it heavily. He was one of the main contributors, and then he took over from the project and now maintains it. And I've got a lot of respect for him as a developer, but also if you go and look at the Spring4D project, it's very lively. The Google groups have got lots of stuff going on, and there's always things happening about it, and it's worth doing. As you grow as a developer, you'll start to appreciate some of the features and functions in there a lot more. Some of the the container classes where you've got maps and multi-map, for example, is very, very useful, because if you sometimes you'd Stefan pronounced it duplicates, but he meant duplicate. Sometimes when you've got duplicates of things, you want to know how many times something was duplicated. You can add stuff to your multi-map, and then you can come up with an instant count of how many times a particular value was duplicated. That can be very useful for all sorts of weird things, graphs and stuff like that. You can write SQL queries to do that with data, but Spring4D makes it even easier. There was dependency injection is also strength of Spring4D. Yes, Stephen, it is, and in fact we didn't talk about that. I did mention earlier the book by Nick Hodges. If you go to Nick's website, and I'll just put that up here, which is okay. I think I've only got a QR code for it. If you go to the, scan that code there, or go to codingindelphi.com. Nick's books in there are all about dependency injection and discusses Spring4D's dependency injection capabilities and stuff like that as well. And if I remember correctly, Stefan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there are also some examples of dependency injection amongst the Spring4D samples. And by the way, when you download the project from the Bitbucket repository, you get a whole bunch of samples in there, and you can open them up, see how they work. It'll take a while to get your head around it, because this stuff it's not difficult once you understand it, but it is, as someone said, yeah, as Didier Kamale, who I know as well, met Didier, as Didier Kamale says, it basically asks you to think again about some of the things. Dependency injection, if you're not sure what that is, I recommend reading Nick's book about it, because it's actually an important concept, and it helps you make code that is not overly dependent and intertwined and spaghetti-like. And dependency injection is one of the techniques I'm doing that. I used it in the last project I did before I worked for Embarcadero. I used it very heavily, and it allowed us to swap something in the back end like that, no changes. And it was because, you know, the person who was managing that project is a bit fuzzy on their thinking, shall we say, and just suddenly decided to change something on the drop of a hat. And I'm like, no problem. But with the dependency injection, I could change it, and it didn't make it a difficult thing to maintain, which is a very good thing. And like I say, once you've been coding for a while, you'll understand what it's all about, and that it's a very good thing. Right now, for some of the newbie people that are on this, they're probably thinking, I have no idea what they're talking about, but trust me on that. Okay, so we were talking about Spring4D, and I think we're done for that now. You can go to spring4d.org, download it via GitHub, and off you go. There's some new books out that I'm going to talk about soon as well. In particular, one from Dalia Prashnikar, who is one of my favorite authors. So you don't just have to have Nick's books as well. Dalia has done one to do with testing in Delphi. And again, if you're getting into slightly more professional, advanced topics, then Dalia's book is a really good book to read. It's her latest one. Just go to their daliaprashnikar.info, and she's got all about it on there. It's very, very good. Oh, and as Stefan says as well, because he's still hanging in there in the YouTube, Delphi High Performance 2nd edition by Primož Gabrieljic. You know what? Whilst we're going to do that, I'm also going to add, and I apologize for not having done this before, and that is adding Patrick's site on here. Patrick Crematan. And let me just add this in. Okay, so Delphi High Performance 2nd edition by Primož Gabrieljic, who's also very, very smart guy as well. He's got quite a lot of stuff on Spring4D collections. And if you're not sure where that is, go to delphibooks.com, and you can see all the books on there, including Dalia's and Primož's book as well, because it's very, Primož is one of those guys who's a really good author, and it's really intrinsic technical stuff explained in I read Primož's stuff when I was just doing development myself and learned a lot. And same with Nick. I would consider Nick's books, Dalia's books, and did I say Primož? Anyway, those books are some of the ones that are really essential, I think, in getting a little bit more advanced in what we need to do. Did not Stefan forget to mention that Spring4D contains a logging framework too? Actually, it kind of showed it in the video, but yes, there's a logging framework that's pretty powerful as well. There's quite a few logging frameworks out there, but the Spring4D one's very nice. And like I say, Spring4D, it kind of duplicates some of the ideas of some of the collections, but does them subtly differently. I like the idea of the anonymous methods that fire when something closes and stuff like that. And the shareable interface is very good as well. Anyway, I'm going to call it a day for now. And Stefan says he does, but it's one of those things where numerous other libraries exist that really focus on that subject. Yes, exactly. There's a lot of there, but I mean, if you only want to use the one, or you want to cut down on the number of libraries, well, there's one that does it. We've had a few webinars where we've talked about libraries and things like that. Patrick, slight spelling mistake, but another great tool from Stefan, Test Insight from unit testing live in the IDE. Yes, you know, he's got a lot going on. And we're going to talk about Test Insight in a later episode probably as well, and that thing. So that's it anyway. Thanks everybody for joining us. I hope you enjoyed that. I know for some people it was probably kind of a little bit over their heads if they're just getting to grips with the Object Pascal language of Delphi. And maybe, you know, you're never going to use anything like dependency injection. That's absolutely fine. You can write programs and never, ever worry yourself about it. But as soon as you start to consider, you know, trying to refine your skills and get a little bit more sharp on some of these techniques, they can be very helpful. And it does pay to invest a little bit of academic effort, shall we say, into examining what they can do, because they're very, very useful, and Spring4D is a really great tool that helps out with that as well. Anyway, I'm going to say goodbye for now, and I will see you again on Friday, where I believe that we are going to be talking about Docker. Yes, Docker, I think is Friday, but if you're not sure, just go to the site and sign up or look at it. The webinar site is this one, learndelphi.org/Delphi-30 for 30 webinars. Or if you're a QR code person, then you can go to the webinar site up there and scan that, and it'll take you to it as well. If you're watching on YouTube, or you're watching on LinkedIn or Instagram or Meta Live, I think they call it, or whatever, if you click on the subscribe button, and the like button would be great as well, but the subscribe button, and then there's a little kind of bell. If you click on all, we won't know who you are. We can't you know, bombard you with lots of sales emails, but you will get notified when I go live. I'm not always going to be doing it Tuesdays and Fridays. We've got some shorts that we're going to short videos that we're going to promote, and a few other additional ones. We're building topics as we go along. The more of these 30 for 30 I do, the more people say, I'd really like a webinar on X subject, and then we're going to do it. The low roll one being it's a classic example, but that's it. I'm going to say goodbye, and also salut Patrick, ça va? Au revoir, my friend, and have a good day, night, week, and a happy birthday for who wants it as well. Bon anniversaire, indeed. And that is it. I'll see you all again on Friday. Thanks a lot, Stefan, for hanging out as well in the YouTube. I really appreciate it.